The Pro Show is brought to you by Rocket Media and our proprietary Flash HDR photo process, providing you with the best, most realistic photos of your property. See the difference at rocketmedia.com. Welcome to the Pro Show. I'm Rick Machle. We have a great show for you today. In this market, are you wondering, as a buyer, how much should I offer? What are the strategies? We're going to talk about that for quite a while. We're also going to be talking about how much you should get your house ready in the snow now that we have some here in Colorado. Do I need to shovel? Do I need to get the place ready all the time? How does that work in this market? And we have some great agents to talk to you about that. In addition, Greg will be here talking about rentals. Nancy's talking about mortgages. And finally, we have a couple of great properties, all next on the Pro Show. So today we have three amazing Coldwell Banker agents from north to south. We're going to start with Carrie Holmes up in northern Colorado. Hi, Carrie. Good morning.
Morning, Rick.
And then we have Lori Delaney kind of in the Superior, Broomfield, Boulder area. Hi, Lori.
Good morning, Rick.
And then a little bit further south is Debbie Jacobs down in the South Metro area. So we're kind of South Metro North today. And it's great to have all you here. Any updates, any news, that you want to share as far as what's going on in the market? Or shall we just jump into Carrie's numbers? I'm going to walk through these, and then Carrie can kind of give an idea whether it still seems like these are pretty accurate, given that they were up through November 1st. And the average sales price is up 6% to $695,000. That's amazing that northern Colorado is more than the metro area as a whole. The median list price is $645,000, up 3% month over month. And then the sales price, list price ratio is about the same, 98%. And then the properties sold are up 25% to 369 from October to November. So it looks like those interest rates are really kicking in. And the months of supply of inventory is down 17%. And then if we switch over here to Weld County, the average sales price is flat from September into October to $540,000. The median list price is up to $517,000. It's up 4%. And the sales to list price at 98%. And number of properties sold is way up 12%, 280 over September. And then the month supply of inventory is down 17% from September. So, Carrie, what do you think? Does that sound about right? Sounds like they've been pretty busy as far as selling.
Absolutely. So what we're doing is we're looking at two counties. So we're looking at Larimer County, which I like to equate to west of I-25, and then Weld County, east of I-25. So I think the big news here, Larimer County, you did say our average list price to sales price is higher than the metro. I'm going to attribute part of that to people with larger budgets purchasing at this time. So interest rates aren't as much of a factor. So I wonder if that isn't a big contributing decision in people making a decision to move there. So I think overall it's good news. If the home's on the market and you're selling, we do have our inventory going down. So that's definitely a huge feature. I think one of the things we'll chat about a little bit later is that list price to sales price. And you're going to see in both markets, we are down about 2%. So overall, it's looking like a great market in both Larimer and Weld County.
What are we seeing a little bit further south? Debbie, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing that there are still listings that are coming on the market even this late in the season. And I am seeing also things that have been on for a long time. Buyers are coming in with a aggressive offer, which is sometimes being accepted. So I think we probably are a little less or a little bit more than a 2% to the price per the purchase price. So I think buyers are getting a little better of a deal at the moment.
Lori, how about you?
I think that homes are staying on the market a little bit longer, but inventory it is actually slightly decreasing. But I am like Debbie, I am seeing some homes that are hitting the market this late in the season and trying to get them under contract before Thanksgiving, which is already next week. So, but I do notice that people seem to be more focused on Thanksgiving than buying right now. Just my own personal experience from my own listings.
So a little bit slower as far as shoppers out there.
Yeah, a little more sluggish.
So
I'd love to see some new inventory up here in northern Colorado. We do have those home buyers out here still, Rick. So if you are thinking about putting your home on the market, I know typically we don't encourage you to do it over the holiday season, but there are buyers out there and they are looking for their new place. So again, that's here in northern Colorado.
One thing for buyers at this time of year is that you're not competing with pardon me, you're not competing with a lot of other buyers. And so you do get a little bit better pricing strategies, so to speak. And I think that it also shows that these are the buyers that are really out there that have to find a house. So sellers can benefit from that as well.
good news if you're looking to buy or sell. Sounds like, you've got a little bit of a balanced market at this point. Showing your property at its best online is one of the first of many important steps to getting your home sold. At Rockin' Media, we provide you with the best quality photos taken by staff photographers, not contractors, who process your photos individually. We use our proprietary Flash HDR process, which combines the natural look of HDR with the color accuracy of Flash, along with properly exposed windows. Rockin' Media's HDR process is clearly exceptional. Find out more and schedule online at rockinmedia.com. I'm a buyer out there and I'm wondering, what should I do? I'm looking at a $600,000 home, which is about the median for the metro or Front Range area. And I'm thinking, how should I go in? I want to get the house. I'm married to the house, but not really. If I get it, great. If not, how can I get the house? What should I be offering in this market versus different markets? And we'll start with Lori on this one.
Well, I think first off, it's great to be in contact, close communication with the listing agent and reach out to them and find out if they have any other offers or serious interest.
Should I do that as a buyer, or is that something you're going to do?
No, I'm sorry. I would reach out to your buyer's agent, a realtor, represent you as the buyer, and have the buyer reach out to that listing agent and see if there's any other, offers or serious interest in the property. And that kind of dictates a little bit as to, what price point you have to go in at. And this time of year, I agree with Debbie. It's a wonderful time where there's fewer buyers out there, but of the buyers that are there, they're more serious buyers. So generally speaking, you don't have the competition that you had, previously in the middle of the summer and even early fall. So this has been a wonderful time for me to be able to, when everyone's focused, I did this a different time of year. Everyone was focused on graduation, and we went in there like end of May, and see right now, everybody's focused on Thanksgiving, and you can snag a nice property like 600,000 or possibly under list.
So Debbie, should I offer less money? And if so, how much?
Great question. So I think that one of the things that you said in your opening statement was, I'm not married to this house. And that really is a huge key to what the buyer's agent would do for that particular buyer. Because if you're not really married to it, you like it, you're not totally in love, it's not the one you absolutely have to have, then you can go in as with a more aggressive price offer. As an example, maybe what you do is you go in and you would say, after you, looked at comps. So I would look at comps first and see how long it's been on the market. Let's just say it's been on the market for 90 days. So typically that's a kind of a scary time for a seller. 90 days is a long time. And then I would probably say, if you're not totally married to it, let's go in aggressive. And maybe it's a 10% $50,000 or $60,000 off of ask. And then what we would do is I would devise an offer that has some goodies for the seller. As an example, we're going to be as close to as is as possible. We're going to move our inspection as close to acceptance deadline as possible, so that the gift to the seller is that we're no nonsense, even though we're coming in very low.
So you're really trying to be aggressive, but also accommodating to the seller to hopefully get that done.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie, what else should I ask for?
Well, I'm going to beg to differ to some degree with Debbie in our current market here in Northern Colorado. Obviously, as a buyer's agent, I want to get my clients the best possible price and terms. You said you weren't married to the house, so let's definitely make an offer. We're not coming in at full price. Again, depending what Lori said, if there are no other offers on the property, we need to know all that background and what's important to the seller. I do feel, bringing in, and let's call it an aggressive offer comparatively to the last 4 years. But I don't want to insult the seller as well, because it's a broader negotiating strategy. I want to come in low enough that at least we can start that conversation. Because if we come in too low, I've had people say, "Oh, I'm going to offer 100 less." Well, 100 less on a 600,000 just doesn't make sense, and you've insulted the seller, and so you've just kind of started the negotiations off on a poor foot. You might not even get a counter offer. If you do, they might just come back at full price. So you really need to rely on your buyer's agent to come in and help you with what works for your market for this particular home. And I think that's what Debbie was alluding to there.
So are you talking, Carrie, that is 10% too much of a leap in this market up in Northern Colorado? Depends on the house.
It is really property specific. And when I'm starting working with my buyers, I always give them that caveat, because like Debbie, we're doing the comps, we're making sure what the market is bearing, what the sales are on this home, similar homes in that area, that neighborhood, that square footage, etc. So I think it's really important to know that on the onset. In fact, case in point, just showed a fabulous property that was very unique to some buyers this past week, and there were multiple offers on it, and it was a 600,000 priced home. So again, it just depends. How was it priced originally? In my personal opinion, I thought it was priced 70,000 too low in this particular market. So you've really got to work with your buyer's agent and see what makes sense.
Lori, are you seeing people asking for points, paying down the interest rate?
It just really depends on the buyer. And
Okay.
yes, for the lower price point where there is a loan involved, but sometimes I deal with a lot of baby boomers who are downsizing and paying cash for their replacement home. So in that, there's no points to be had. But yes, when there is a loan involved, there certainly can be requests for concessions to pay down points, or there's actually a specific concession that you can put in additional provisions where you ask for a 2-1 buy down, which, in case you haven't heard of that before, it's where you buy the interest rate down 2 percentage points for the first year. And that can be very desirable and a common thing when there is a loan involved in this current market with the interest rates still where they're at.
Okay. But obviously, if I'm competing with other people and you found out that they're cash buyers, I'm not going to be asking for that.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, is it's so key to talk to the listing agent, find out, what you're up against. I mean, if you're up against cash, certainly, you're going to be higher risk just with that loan. If you're up against maybe another contingent offer, but your buyers aren't contingent, that's another key piece of information. So it's really by a case by case basis, and you really have to ask all the questions so you know how to strategically position your buyers.
And Debbie, are there any rules relative to what a listing agent can tell a buyer's agent about other potential buyers out there? Or, they might say, sorry, just submit your best offer.
I think that you would be radically surprised at how much information you can gain from various listing agents. Depends on how long they've been in the industry and depends on how well they communicate. But you can, once you have been in the business for a long time, you can get a read even just by what their demeanor is from the listing agent. You could even over the phone, like, what's best for your seller? What is your seller looking for? Now, those types of questions, you can almost always get a great answer. They're going to need a post occupancy. They're moving out of state. They're, yada, 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 whatever that specific and unique situation is for that particular property. So it is very important, as everyone has said, that initial communication to the listing agent about what's going on with that property is really key. And I do have another strategy that I like to use. If I am going to go in, let's say I have a buyer that is very, very specific on how much that they can spend per month on their mortgage. And that is going to require points, which Lori was talking about just recently. So one of the strategies is to go in as a higher price on the listing than asking, just go, like by 10 grand, and then ask for a seller's concession. So the net to the seller is exactly the same, but you still benefit your buyer because you're still being able to buy down the points. And so again, you're kind of looking at it from the seller's perspective of how to get the deal over the finish line for your buyer.
However, Debbie, doesn't it matter that whether it'll appraise for that extra 10,000? Wouldn't that impact it?
Yeah, great question. I think the appraisal is going to know and see, because they do review the offers, that there is seller's concession. So I think that they also are going to look at the net amount, not the purchase price amount.
Carrie?
I think the important word Debbie hit the hammer on the head with was net. Sellers are looking at their net. What's the walkaway number? So that's really what they're looking at. So whether it's coming off the price, if it's going towards points or buy downs, that's what they are looking at. So there's a ton of different ways that we can structure that. But at the end of the day, that's really what the seller is looking at. You're absolutely right, though, Rick. It still does have to appraise at the purchase price. So that is one of the things we need to keep in mind when we are structuring an offer. I think for me, one of the important things as we look today's market versus maybe historically is we get all those standard contingencies that were maybe being waived in the crazy market of several years ago. And what I mean by that is I do get to do my home inspection. I have this contingency in here. I do have the appraisal clause, which, in the crazy market, some people were waiving those contingencies, buying as is without a home inspection, which I really don't recommend. But today we get those standard Colorado contingencies, and that's definitely a plus for the entire contractual process, especially our home buyers.
So, Lori, along those same lines, does it make sense for me to go in, be relatively not or less aggressive on the price to begin with, but then see what the home inspection comes back with, and then maybe ask for things after that?
Well, absolutely. That's actually the trend that's happening. I think being that it's more of a buyer's market right now, buyers are able to get a home for less, and then they're actually able to go in and ask for reasonable things on an inspection that would affect health and safety or function. And that's a whole nother discussion of inspections. But I think it does, this time of year is a great time of year to be able to possibly get a home for under list. And as Carrie alluded to, it really is dictated by the neighborhood, the area, and that particular homeowner and seller and what they're willing to accept and what might offend them. I always, again, I think the listing agent has a good handle on how an offer is going to be received. And I ask them, how can my buyers make the best offer possible for your sellers? And then that gives an open door for them to tell me what their sellers have given them permission to tell me. And then I'm able to better structure my offer accordingly. So it does depend on the situation.
I think, Debbie, this is part of this is a relationship thing, that they know when they're dealing with another agent, it's a different relationship than if I go, I want this house. I'm not going to, because of all the perceived stuff going on with the buyer's agent, I'm just going to represent myself. But if I called you as a listing agent on this listing and said, so tell me what's going on with this listing, how many offers have you had, that sort of thing, I don't think I'm going to get the same reaction, am I, than if it's a buyer's agent.
You're definitely not. My first comment is going to be, wow, I would love to assist you as a customer, but I do want you to understand that I work for the seller, and anything that you disclose to me now, I will be, communicating to the seller. So, I'm happy to help you, but it's not in your best interest if you have not been an experienced purchaser. I just recently had a transaction where the real estate agent was the person that called me up. They were from out of state. They did not have the same type of deadlines or process that we have here in Colorado. And he did call me up, but he was really very confused, even as a long-term real estate agent out of, that was from another state. He was very confused about our process and could have made some very serious mistakes had my seller, wanted to take advantage of him. And thankfully, they did not want to, and I was not going to, promote that type of behavior. But it's risky for sure.
But Debbie, aren't we more likely? You're probably, as the listing agent, not going to tell me, Joe Blow, or Rick Machle, what the some of the stuff you might tell a listing agent or a buyer's agent, or are you pretty much telling them the same information if I'm just a guy off the street and I'm saying I'm representing myself?
I think that what would happen is that the buyer's agent would have the nuance understanding. So let's say the buyer's agent calls me up and says, how negotiable is this price? Just by my comments, the way that I handle that, I might say, well, bring me an offer, let's discuss it. I think there's a little wiggle room. That conversation is going to be totally different complexion from what a buyer's agent would understand as to what a retail person that walks in off the street that hasn't purchased a property for 15 years, that conversation is totally different. And if I'm representing the seller as the seller's listing agent, I can't go in and make any type of advice. All I can say is, okay, Rick, what would you like to offer on the property? Well, you don't have any basis. You don't have any comps. You don't have any history. You don't really know maybe anything more than the number of days on market. You don't have any idea of whether or not I've been under contract and fallen out of contract. So it's really wild, wild west when clients are trying to represent themselves.
Carrie, you were going to say something?
Oh, I love that. The wild, wild west. Yes. And here's the thing, home buyers don't know what they don't know. So that's why they're working with a realtor. And I think a lot of times they think they're going to save themselves some money, on the off chance that they are required to pay the buyer's agent commission. Many times the sellers are still paying the buyer's agent's commission. So that is covered still in today's market, regardless of what you've heard regarding the NAR legal situation that just transpired. So again, you really don't know what you don't know. And there's all these nuances, as Debbie was alluding to, that we can pick up from a simple conversation with the listing agent. And that's just one component of it, Rick. So there's a lot of different variables and negotiating terms that we can throw out there to maybe get you the best possible price, but still, have a win for the seller on some of the terms that they're looking for. So there's so many variables, and it's really critical to work with a buyer's agent because you actually might not save any money and actually cost yourself quite a bit of money.
So, Lori, what else should I be doing to get that home? And obviously now if I change it from whatever I can take it or leave it house to I want this house, what should I be doing?
Well, I think we haven't even really talked about getting pre-qualified from a lender. But if a loan is involved and you're not a cash buyer, it can be very advantageous to not only get pre-qualified, but qualified all the way past underwriting so that all you need is the appraisal of that home. So that makes you as close to being a cash buyer as possible. So I always tell my buyers, let's align ourselves and get our ducks in a row ahead of time so that when that right home comes along and presents itself, since inventory is relatively low right now, then we won't lose it. So that's a huge piece to the puzzle.
You said pre-qualified or pre-approved? Which do you prefer?
Well, I actually get both of these mixed up. I think pre-approval is basically when you just get pre-approved and your buyer hasn't actually gone through underwriting. But then there's like a pre-qualification, I believe the lenders call it, where you can get them pre-qualified all the way through underwriting. And they're just literally waiting on an appraisal of that home that you're under contract for. And that makes them even less of a risk to the seller. So that
I think that's backwards.
Strategy.
Is that backwards? Maybe
you mean how
it is backwards. I think pre-approved is more qualified, correct, Debbie?
Okay, yeah. Debbie, you talk to that. I'm not a lender. So.
Exactly. That's why we have our lender come on every week.
Right. So I just had a situation where literally the buyer was pre-approved to the point that they had already been completely through underwriting, meaning all of the documents, all they needed was an address to be able to plug in, and it's a 14-day close even with the loan. So that was really competitive even against a cash offer. Right. And I felt, the seller actually chose the offer that had the loan instead of the cash offer just because it was a known entity that wanted to actually live in the house and they loved the house. And I happened to have seen them at the open house. So I knew that they were very motivated, and the seller actually took that offer because of that, how far along they were through underwriting.
And Carrie, wouldn't it seem like if I'm pre-approved up to, let's say 575, and this is a $600,000 home, I can probably, is that something as a buyer's agent you might share and go, they can't do anything more? Or how does that work?
I think if that is truly their top dollar, then of course you would want to share that ahead of time. As a buyer's agent, I would really encourage my clients maybe not to look at that property because we don't know the seller's situation, and that might be their bottom line at that 600. So you really run the risk of falling in love with the home and not being able to purchase it. And there's nothing worse than that. When you're looking at a 600,000 versus a 575, you might be looking at different bells and whistles. So you're just setting yourself up for, maybe heartache down the road. So if it is, I'm pre-approved for 575, but I talked to the lender and I've got some wiggle room, so maybe I can afford a little bit more, then by all means, if you definitely want to look at this property, we're going to go ahead and look at it. But to your point, without a pre-approval letter, frankly, no seller is going to accept that offer. It doesn't make sense. Why would I take my home off the market for a possible buyer that hasn't even taken the time, energy to go ahead and get pre-approved. That does not say serious home buyer to me. Plus, nowadays, there's so many lenders that do work on the weekends that, you know, it's a quick call. You can always get pre-approved pre-qualified in a relatively quick amount of time. So as realtors, we have those lenders on speed dial that even if it's on a Saturday afternoon, we can reach out and they're going to field that call and help us get pre-approved. That way, the buyer's also going to have a relative idea what their payment's going to be. Again, there's nothing worse than getting under contract and being uncomfortable with your payment. So it's really a critical component of the process.
So, Lori, as a buyer's agent, are you going to be able to get from the listing agent how motivated the sellers are? Like, oh, they're going through a divorce and the wife is just wants out. Do you get any of that information so that I can have an advantage, or is there like a firewall there?
Well, as Debbie said earlier, I think you can get quite a bit. It really just depends. I mean, you don't get what you don't ask for. And there are some agents that just, push back and say, give me your highest to best. And they don't want to give me any information. But the majority of them will talk, and they've been given permission from their sellers to mention that, yeah, they're going through a divorce and this and that. One thing I wanted to circle back around and be the devil's advocate with what Carrie said. I actually would show a home. I'd show a home that's listed at 600 in this market and that they're only approved up to 575. I would especially show them that in this market because it could be, I mean, it's going to be a case-by-case basis again, but it could be that that home has been on the market for 90 days or 45 or anyway, and they haven't received any offers. And we have, my buyers have been pre-approved, not pre-qualified, all the way through underwriting, and they could do a 14-day close. And if we walk in there and I talk to the listing agent hasn't had any offers, or they had an offer that fell through and it's back on the contract, back on the market. I mean, a number of things could have happened, but we may be their best and only offer. So if we give them a 575 offer, which is far more than a 10% discount, and we have a 14-day close and we are pre-approved, they're going to possibly take it. And so that this is the time of year that type of scenario is more likely to happen. And so I wouldn't shy away from it in the area that I work.
And I think even Carrie would admit, or Debbie, that it's, once again, property specific, circumstances specific, and you can see all the history. You can see, as a buyer's agent, you can see, oh, that was under contract, it fell out. And I think even, I mean, there are websites like Zillow that show, under contract and then back on the market, but it's probably delayed as well, some of that reporting. I'm not certain of that, but you guys are seeing it real time, aren't you, Carrie?
Absolutely. And there is that conversation. I know we keep kind of harping on that. But per Lori's point, how much a seller's agent can disclose to the buyer's agent, they can get permission to tell you different things like time is really important or price is really important to these people. So the seller does need to give permission. Let's just say we are in a multiple offer situation. The seller can dictate to tell every agent that's made an offer, the highest on the table is 625. So then it might come in that, somebody wants to beat that offer or they don't. They know going in that seller has allowed their agent to disclose that. And it might be one of those things that the seller agent needs to have a conversation and say, is this in your best interest? Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no.
So, Debbie, it could be that they also say, give us your last best offer. We're going to, take whatever comes in. And obviously that was more valuable in a hot market 3 or 4 years ago than it is now. But it seems like there's got to be some negotiation that goes on in this market, right, Debbie?
Definitely. And in this market, it is more of a balanced market. And of course, at the end of the year, if and to Carrie's conversation about the 575, I agree with Lori. I probably would show that $600,000 property. Now, if my buyers are really tight, you know, you have to give a very good consultation to the buyer, right? Because you don't want them so house poor that they've decided that they're not going to have any vacations, they're not going to save any money because they love this house. That's not really in their best interest at all. But if they are comfortable with the 575 payment, one of the things that we might ask for would be a permanent mortgage buy down, because you can get or 2 points or 1 point as a permanent buy down, and that might give them that breathing room. So yes, all of the things, every situation is unique, and by really communicating with that listing agent, that's where you're going to get your buyer in the best position possible.
And I think in this, Lori.
I was just going to say, and on the other hand, too, it can work to the buyer's advantage in communicating to the listing agent, saying, I'll call them up and say, hey, my buyer really loves your home, but they're qualified only up to 575. Would this be an exercise in futility, putting an offer together? Because that is their top, And then if they say, oh, absolutely not, go ahead and, bring it on. And then I've positioned my buyer to the seller, for the seller not to counter, which, so they have a higher probability of getting that for 575 and not a penny more. And I'm just being honest and forthright. And then the listing agent can tell me, hey, no, that's going to be offensive. Don't even spend the time. Or yes, certainly write an offer. 9 times out of 10, they're going to encourage me to write an offer unless they have a 625 and a multiple offer situation, kind of thing.
Well, and I think this is just another example of why having an agent on your behalf makes sense, because if I'm trying to do this on my own and I go, the most I can do is 575, first of all, you're, as the listing agent, are going, well, of course you're going to say that. Whereas I think there's some sort of ethical, they know they're going to probably work with any of the three of you someday in the future. And if you basically lied to them and they find out about it, they're not going to be happy. They're not, so they're more likely to trust you saying that this is the top they can do. They're qualified up to 575, and they've told me I can tell you that. But if I came in as an end user or as a buyer on my own, you're probably less likely to believe me and just trying to lowball me, especially if I came in and said 540 is the best I can do. And they might go, well, good luck. So
yeah, honestly, I think if buyers utilize buyer agents, they will save them money and more than cover the costs. And generally speaking, even in today, after what Carrie talked about with the NAR settlement, I have found the majority of the time, in fact, every single time this past fourth quarter, since that legislation went into practice, the sellers are still paying for the buyer's agent. So I highly, highly recommend buyers to utilize the service of a buyer's agent that advocates for them.
Well, and once again, Carrie.
I also think that there's a misconception that people think that they are going to get that amount off the purchase price when they don't use a buyer's agent. That is simply not necessarily the case. So, it depends on however the contract is structured between the seller and the seller's agent. So I think there's kind of a misconception there. And so why wouldn't you work with a home buyer, especially if you're not going to get dollar for dollar off the price anyways? So it's something just to be mindful of.
One of the things that buyer's agent and listing agents have in the state of Colorado, most of us utilize the software where we communicate both the buy and sell contracts amongst each other through this software. And so instead of faxing and DocuSign and emailing and all of that, the efficiency with that particular software and the communication between buyer's agent and listing agent is also a very key point that an end user consumer would never be able to have access to.
It's very it's very complex, this whole process. Lori?
I was just going to say that, they'd have to go to the Dora website and literally find the right contract to use. And if this is not their business, I mean, that could be a chore, and then download that. And yeah, and then with our software, we're able to electronically sign. So, I mean, I've worked with people on both coasts to buy a listing here in Colorado. And I mean, there's just a lot of things that utilizing the agent's tools brings to the table, as Debbie says.
And it's also, like was discussed earlier, sellers are worried about the net proceeds. Quite honestly, the buyers are also concerned about net price they're having to pay. And so having somebody who can negotiate well for you, or in this case for me, helps me to potentially get a lower price. And even if there's some finagling with the buyer's agent commission, I'm probably still getting a better price net in the end. And so it makes a whole lot of sense to work with somebody who's qualified, a professional, a real pro, like we have here, as you're trying to buy that next home. And obviously, as we talked about here, it's a lot more complex than I'm going to write up an offer or have an attorney write up an offer. They'll present it, or I'll present it and get it done. There's so much more to it, and you really need to pay attention and talk to a qualified real estate agent about what they can do to help you buy your perfect home. So like every week, we have Nancy Alexander to talk about mortgage insights and give us some information on how to best use real estate for, buying a home, how to get that mortgage. But this week we want to talk about real estate as it comes to using it as an investment, doing it as making an investment property, and what are some of the restrictions around that? And so, hi, Nancy, glad you joined us again. So tell us what, how does it work if you're looking for it as an investment?
Okay. So it's, again, great topic. So investment property, you guys, you can buy real estate in 3 different ways, right? You can buy it as your primary residence, you can buy it as a second home, or you can buy it as an investment property. And each one of those categories carry different rules and regulations, interest rates around them. If you're focusing on an investment property, the one thing that you have to know, if you're going to buy as a conventional property or use conventional financing, you've got to put a minimum of 20% down. You're going to find your better pricing at 25, even 30% down. So that's the first thing, Rick, that I would say is that down payment piece is different because you can't do the mortgage insurance.
Okay. So you have to put more down. How about your income requirements? Does that come into play?
Debt to income, you can still run that debt to income up to 50%, like you can on a primary residence. However, you have to have what is called reserves, and your reserves equal your PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. If there's an HOA, add that in. You have to have 6 months reserves for every property that you own. So not necessarily does income make a difference, but those reserves certainly make a difference.
And if can I count the income that might be coming from that, like rental income, toward how you qualify?
Yes, you can, because we look at this as a rental property. So we say, we ask for a different appraisal and we ask for rent rolls to be a part of the appraisal. So we're looking at what are the comparables in the area and what do they rent for? And in turn, we can use that income, 75% of that income, towards your income calculation. The other 25%, you guys, the investor puts out to say that's for repairs and maintenance of the property. So if you're getting $2,000 for your rental income, take 75% of that number. That's what the investor or the lender is going to count.
It might also then include vacancy, because nobody rents 100% of the time too. So that probably takes into account that as well.
And whether you're doing short-term or whether you're doing long-term rent, right? We didn't used to be able to count short-term rent. Now we can, because Airbnb, Home Again, etc. is so big.
Well, sounds good. Very complex, and obviously we can't cover it all. And so if you'd like to learn more, reach out to Nancy. I'm sure she'd love to give you more information on how you can start or continue doing or continue doing real estate and having it, let me start over that. So you can, if you reach out to Nancy, you can find out all this information and how to start using real estate as an investment vehicle. And I think next week, let's talk about land, because I think land has its own set of issues as well. And I appreciate your time as well. Thanks, Nancy.
Thanks, Rick.
And like every week, we have Greg Machle here from Real Property Management. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great. And you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, so today we're going to talk about issues and things that come up that maybe tenants don't think about. And Greg's seen a lot of tenants over the years, and this is a good time for them to get a few tips on what not to do when they're out renting. So take it away, Greg.
Many thanks, Rick, and what a great topic to chat through today. So here is the number one mistake that we see that comes from tenants. Number one, they overextend themselves. So they look at the rental amount, but then they don't necessarily take into account that you need electricity and you need gas, and there's a charge for water. So then they don't necessarily water the lawn like it should in the summertime and some of those kinds of things. And so one of the components that we do run into is we see tenants making that mistake. And so that would be something to watch out for. The other component with that goes along tertiary to that is last year, our Congress here locally passed a law that we could only do a 2 times income requirement, meaning rent is $2,000, then what they have to prove to be income qualifiable is $4,000 a month in gross household income. What we are seeing is some folks are pinching themselves too tightly on that. By law, they have the reason to do that. By budget, may not be the best of decisions. The second mistake that we see, tenants, most leases out there tell tenants you are not allowed to do any work on the house, i.e. don't change the light fixtures, i.e. don't change the flooring, don't any one of those components. And yet sometimes we run into that where they do. They decide they don't like the light fixture over the kitchen table, and they spotted one at Lowe's when they were there, and so they put a new light fixture in, and that one's not working properly. It's the wrong voltage, whatever the case may be. So that's probably the second thing that we see is they're overstepping their boundaries in terms of what the lease says, which kind of leads me then to the third, which is a broad category. Anything else that's in the lease that basically says you need to do this or you can't do this. One of the things that we tend to see that the tenants do is they try to sidestep those, and or they try. If a lease says you need to mow the lawn, you need to shovel the snow, you need to take out the weed, get the weeds out, and they're not doing it, then it becomes problematic. Or they're housing other occupants that are not on the lease, or they're housing other pets that are not on the lease. Those are some of the biggest mistakes that we see that end up causing problems in between landlord, us as property manager, and the tenants.
And so a lot of tenants are probably also not really reading those leases, correct?
That is correct, which is why we are making a point in our leases. We are putting the most important things right up front, right out of the gates, so they can see here's the things that are most important. And yes, we need all this other legalese that goes along to that, but here's the core fabric and the core components that you don't want to miss right up front.
That's good advice, because people just don't read anymore, and then it gets them in trouble. And it's interesting because it sounds like they went with the debt to income similar to a mortgage where you can do 50%, but
yes,
what's really shaky is that's 50% of gross, and unless you don't pay any taxes like Social Security taxes or federal taxes or state, you don't. It doesn't. You're living for your rent, so you have to be really careful about that. Just like with your mortgage.
Yeah, it's totally true, and it's just making folks more what we call house poor, whether they're renting or buying. If you quote unquote qualify for that, that's just a lot of your income that is going towards having a roof over your head.
Well, that's interesting. So next week, why don't we talk about? Let's just say your landlord goes bankrupt and gets in foreclosure. We'll talk about what rights the tenants have.
Absolutely.
And let's go through
talk
that.
about that.
All right, sounds good. We'll see you again next week. And if you want to get a hold of Greg or his leasing team to find out more about things to watch out for as a tenant, reach out to Greg and he'll put you in with his leasing team. And I appreciate your help and being on the show again today. When you're thinking about getting your home ready for sale, we're obviously now late fall, early winter, and those bring special challenges for getting the home ready. And I'm going to start with Debbie on this one. What should I be concerned about? Both, and I want to split this up. One is for photography and going on the market beforehand, and then after that. So what should I be concerned about for like the photos, getting that ready?
Well, I think as the listing agent, if we were getting like we are now, a week before Thanksgiving, I would advise them to neutralize the house and not have holiday decorations up at all during the photography session. And the reason for that is that if the house stays on the market for a little while and we get into January, let's just say, you're already past those holiday seasons, and it automatically allows the buyer that's looking on the internet to realize that this house has been on the market for at least 2 months. And so I would highly recommend having zero holiday during the photography. The other thing I think you're going to be a little surprised about, but my big deal is that all of the holiday candles and scents and the pumpkin spice and all of that is a very big turnoff for a lot of buyers. It gives the property the impression when they go visit it that there's something wrong, there's pet stains or something. Why is the house smelling like that? Even if that's a traditional holiday ambience that some sellers would like to have in their home.
So they might think you're masking a smell as opposed to just trying to make it smell pleasant. Carrie, what should I do relative to snow? How clear should it be? How clear is clear, both front and back?
So are we talking about 4 pictures?
Sure. Yeah, 4 pictures. Well, you also don't want people slipping on the ice when they come for visits, but for pictures specifically.
Well, for pictures, we live in Colorado. There's nothing we can do about the weather. From my perspective, I agree with Debbie. It's all about the decorations, the decor. So let's keep that as neutral as possible as far as not having those holiday festive decorations. And I completely agree about the scents with Debbie. As far as the snow, a lot of times I will just have the photographer, I will have you guys, Rick, come in and just take the pictures on the day it is scheduled, regardless of the weather. There is a caveat there, though. If it's completely stormy and blistery and we're just not going to get an outside photo that makes sense, then perhaps we will reschedule. And sometimes you have reached out and your team has reached out and said, let's go ahead and reschedule. So it does depend. And we want to make it look as inviting as possible. So let's make sure those sidewalks are shoveled. In fall, the leaves are raked. It's a free way to make your home shine in the best possible light. And I do want that current season. I have so many sellers say, well, I have these gorgeous pictures of the front of my house in spring. Well, from my perspective, when I put spring pictures up in the holiday season or the fall, it tells me, even as a realtor, it says to me, well, maybe this house has been on the market since last spring. And that's the last thing we want to do. Seasonality is important in Colorado.
Lori, do you want the driveway cleared completely? What are you looking for on your pictures?
Well, I think if you just have it, for pictures, I don't want the photographer to fall either. So I would at least do like a trail in the driveway. You don't have to do the whole thing, but you could do a little trail up to and then through the stairs on the front porch. I mean, it certainly would look a little more uniform if you did the whole driveway. So if they have a snow blower, but I don't think I don't want them to break their back doing it, but one trail is good. I'm going to also be the devil's advocate on this one. If my sellers, potential sellers, already have, Christmas tree up, which many do already before Thanksgiving, and lights, I actually am of the opinion that the more lights, the better. I mean, yes, not everyone celebrates Christmas, but I know everyone loves lights. And Christmas time can be one of the best times to list a home because it just shows so beautifully and it gives that just warm and cozy feeling. And so if it ends up, I mean, I just say go with it because it's this time of year. And then if it ends up still being on the market, which hopefully it wouldn't, into January or February, I would reshoot it. I would just have you come back, Rick, and reshoot it just to give it another lift and put those new photos through at that time. But I do agree with the scented things. I think sometimes there's some very offensive air fresheners or bother me more than candles. That there's just certain air fresheners. In fact, I shouldn't, but that are bought at Costco that are they are so offensive to me. I have like a toucan Sam nose. And so, yeah, I think that you really have to think about all senses and what's going to be pleasing to the maximum number of potential buyers. I will say that if I have an open house, I'll make cookies so that it smells wonderful. Like, it brings back memories of good times at home in the family of origin, possibly when mom was baking cookies. So,
but if I have a 12-foot manger scene that I put on the front yard every year, I probably not want to put that up, right, Lori?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I think in fact, I like white lights.
Okay.
I just like the lighting, I think is always appealing, but you're right. Yeah, I would probably err on caution of having too much of that.
Too many religious symbols up. Yes. And
so I am going to play devil's advocate.
Well, just be an advocate.
Yes. On the snow situation. As Lori mentioned, just having a one-line, access to the property when pictures are going to be taken. Here's my thing. We live in Colorado. Let's hire somebody to do it if we need to before the pictures to get that driveway shoveled. Here's the thing. We don't want the buyers to think, oh my gosh, that's so much work, right? When I purchased the home, I'm going to be the one having to do all this. It was so difficult. They could only get a line in the snow here. So I want it to be as clean as possible, especially if we're a north-facing driveway.
I was just going to say the north-facing.
Coloradoans, what we're talking
could be there
about.
till April.
Exactly.
Right.
Sorry, seller. I think we should list in March.
Well, the other thing too is with our large snowstorms that we had a week or two ago, we also had people clearing their driveways, but the snow was then packed so high you could almost not see the front on some of the photos we were taking. So it's always that balance. And so, but here again, that's when most of the agents call us back to say, okay, the snow's melted, at least it's down to knee height. Can we reshoot it? And that helps. Now, what about for in person? I'm now on the market. How clear is clear? And I'll start with Carrie.
Well, in that case, I will agree with Lori, and just shoveling a path to the door can be sufficient. So we can't always have it absolutely perfect. That's not what we're asking our sellers to do, but we do need to make sure that it is safe. One of the things that's important to keep in mind as well is, sometimes sellers don't want their lockbox on the front door. And so they request that it's put on the gas meter or somewhere else around the sides of the property. As the realtor, we need to track through the snow to go get to that. And so I think it's one of the things that we need to be mindful of and talk in tandem what makes sense. We don't want these people trouncing through the snow, not only the realtors, the buyers, etc., to get to your property, because then you have all those little wet feet at the front door. So it's just, let's look at this as a package deal. Obviously, there's booties and different things that we can leave at the front for buyers when they're walking through the property. But let's look at it as a package deal. Let's keep it safe as well.
And of course, Carrie, that's the time when the gas meters on the garage side, and that's where all the snow got piled up when you cleared the driveway. And so,
Exactly.
And for me, I almost always wear high heels.
oh yeah,
That's
your
my
thing.
deal. You know that. You've, known me for years. But having a pair of flat shoes, I don't think I actually own many, maybe a boot or two.
Yeah.
But walking through rocks and getting to the gas meter, it automatically sets me as negative to the listing agent. So I'm already making judgments about how professional they are when I'm having to walk through the snow in my high heels to get to the lockbox.
So, Lori, this house I want to go see that I'm listing has a great back deck with views of the mountains. Do you encourage them to totally shovel that off, keep that clear?
I don't know that that's as important as the front curb appeal, quite frankly, because once they get inside, when you think of it from a logical standpoint, they remove their shoes or put on the booties, then we get to the back, where the deck is. I don't want them going out there with their sock feet or booties on. So hopefully you could see the mountain view from inside the house and you don't have to be on the deck. So no, I haven't really had them clear that.
Okay.
Me.
Carrie, which way do you go on that?
I would agree with Lori because I don't think it makes sense. We want them to be comfortable. You live in the home, so we want them to see the features of the home. This is how they're going to live in the property. Yes, it would be wonderful. That gives them the option if the deck is cleared. But from my perspective, the priority is really accessing the property. So I think the seller really needs to focus on the coming in component. If they had all the time and energy and wanted to get it off the deck, that would be fabulous. But yes, a lot of times I'm staying inside where it's warm and toasty and looking at that gorgeous Colorado view from the comfort of the inside of the home.
Of course, from my perspective as a photographer, and maybe this should have been in the photographer's part, I want to have that deck cleared for the photos. And so the backside is probably good to have it cleared, at least for the photos. And then maybe you could even put up a picture next to that door going out that shows what it looks like. Or, Debbie, if the homeowners actually have a picture of the backyard, that would be a good thing to put up next to the back door, correct?
And I think Carrie mentioned this earlier, that I don't want to put up spring photos in the MLS and I'll put those online during a winter listing, but having beautiful photos of what the garden looks like in the spring at the property when they are actually visiting in person through photography, kind of set off the side of the back deck kind of idea. I think that's really very beneficial.
Awesome. Well, there are obviously challenges within the winter season, making sure that they can get to your front door, making sure the pictures don't look too snowy, and also being able to get that flavor of what the place looks like even in the winter, because that, we live in a beautiful state, and personally, I think the winter pictures and the winter look is great. And just to let people know, it's also a great time for twilight photos because we get the light coming out of the windows bouncing off of the snow, and they just make amazing twilight photos this time of year. And it also de-emphasizes the dormant foliage that we have except for the evergreens, but a lot of trees. So twilight photos are also good for that purpose as well. So the first home for sale is at 1136 Opal Street, Unit 204 in Broomfield. Lori, tell us about this condo.
This is a great 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo that's perfect for convenient living. It's 725 square feet. It also comes with a single car garage, so your car can be protected from the winter weather. And it also has a second parking spot in the parking lot. It has a wonderful balcony off of it. It's tucked back away, very private, doesn't back to any busy roads or anything. Has a wonderful open floor plan with a nice spacious living room, kitchen, and its own separate eating nook. And then a very sizable primary bedroom with a walk-in closet. And there you can see the nook and
Nice kitchen.
Nice kitchen. Yeah.
Bathroom or the bedroom are those vaulted ceilings? Looks like there's a little bit of vaulted.
And there's vaulted ceilings in the main living area where you spend 80% of your time. And then you have just a really lovely view of trees and so forth outside of the balcony and the primary bedroom. So it's a lovely spot for anyone who just wants lock and leave and convenient living real close to all the amenities of shopping and restaurants and access to 36 or I-25. So very, very conveniently located in Broomfield. It's 1136 Opal Street, Unit 204. Come see it. Don't miss this. I don't think it'll last too much longer at 325.
Be sure to give Lori a call. Thanks, Lori. Next, we have a single-family home in Windsor at 1528 Sandy Lane in Windsor. And we are going to have Carrie tell us a little bit about this.
Thanks, Rick. I'm excited to show you this home in Water Valley. It is a ranch patio home. It has been impeccably maintained. Fantastic open concept here. It's just shy of 1,700 square feet on the main level, 2-bed, 2-bath, no maintenance. We love those, especially with winter right around the corner. You'll see that cozy fireplace. Fantastic kitchen, open concept, granite counters. We've got the beautiful stainless steel appliances included. And this one is currently listed at $550,000. So it's the ranch that's finished, and there's a full unfinished basement. So there's another about 1,700 square feet down there for extra storage. If you decide to finish it down the road, there's that opportunity as well. And it's the nice little harbor walk community in Water Valley. And as you know, Rick, that's a lifestyle community.
Yep.
So there are water features throughout the community, walking trails. There's actually little beaches, golf course, lots of ways to get plugged into that. So great way if you're looking at downsizing or just looking for that low maintenance lifestyle. This one is definitely what we call move-in ready.
And I love some of the little extras like the coffered ceiling in the primary bedroom. That's not normally done. And especially at this price point, love that it has the washer, dryer, laundry room, which is a benefit as well. What a great property. If you want to take a look at it, please give Carrie a call. I'm sure she'd love to show it to you. Thanks, Carrie. What a great discussion we've had relative to whether a buyer's agent is really going to get you a lot of benefit. Seems like it is. Things you need to consider relative to your home being ready when you go on the market in the winter. And I appreciate these three ladies being with me today. If you want to reach out to any of them, please feel free to do so at the numbers on the screen. And they and others have given you great information on previous shows, and you can check those out at theproshow.com or on your favorite podcast. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thanks, everyone.